Good morning, everybody. It is July 27th, 2026, and the Strait of Hormuz right now is unlike anything it has been in modern history. What the United States military is doing in that narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman at this exact moment is something that has never been done before in the history of naval warfare. And it is working in a way that should make every single person watching this stop and truly appreciate the level of innovation and capability that the American military has brought to this fight. We are going to walk through the entire picture today because the individual pieces of this story are genuinely remarkable. But it is when you put them all together that you realize you are watching a fundamental transformation in how naval power is projected and enforced in the 21st century. Here's what we are covering. The Corsair unmanned surface vessels, autonomous sea drones, that just made history as the first American sea drones ever used in combat, and what they did to a major Iranian naval facility is going to set the table for this entire conversation. The naval blockade mechanics, how they actually work, what CENTCOM has done to enforce them, how many ships have been intercepted, how many have been redirected, and what the one that refused to comply found out when it tried to run the blockade. The full accounting of what this blockade is costing Iran financially, because the numbers will surprise you. The Aegis combat system network connecting every American ship in the region into one unified real-time picture that gives U.S. naval forces an information advantage the IRGC cannot match. Iran's shadow fleet, how it works, how it gets caught, and why the evidence that takes them down almost always comes from their own video footage. The honest military assessment of what Iran still has in the Strait, despite everything that has been stripped away. And a strategic analysis that maps exactly what the United States is building out there in that waterway, and why it matters not just for this conflict, but for the next generation of global energy security. All of it is coming. Let us get right into it. The thing that most people following this conflict do not fully know yet is that on the same day the naval blockade was reinstated on July 14th, CENTCOM quietly made military history. 3 Corsair unmanned surface vessels manufactured by Saronic Technologies sailed into the Strait of Hormuz and struck a submarine and ship maintenance facility at Bandar Abbas naval base on the Iranian coast. 3 autonomous sea drones, 1 Iranian naval facility. First time in history that the United States military has employed sea drones in offensive combat operations. CENTCOM posted about it on their official social media pages and described this strike as degrading Iran's ability to continue attacking commercial shipping. But the significance goes far beyond the tactical result. What the Corsair strike at Bandar Abbas represents is the formal arrival of unmanned surface warfare as a genuine combat tool in the American naval arsenal, and the Strait of Hormuz is where it made its debut. The Corsair is not a prototype. It is not a technology demonstrator. It is an operationally deployed autonomous surface vessel developed by Saronic Technologies, a Texas-based defense company under the umbrella of Task Force 59, which is U.S. Naval Forces Central Command's dedicated unmanned systems unit, and the Navy's primary hub for integrating drones and artificial intelligence into maritime operations. Task Force 59 has been developing and testing these platforms in the Gulf for months, and the same Corsair that just struck Bandar Abbas was also involved in the rescue of 2 U.S. Army helicopter crew members after their Apache was shot down in the Strait earlier in this conflict. The same platform. Rescue mission 1 week, offensive combat, strike the next. That range of capability in a single autonomous platform is exactly what Task Force 59 has been building toward, and it now has its first confirmed combat kill against an Iranian military facility. Think about what that means for Iranian naval planners. The Americans now have platforms that can enter contested water, execute a strike, and leave without a human crew on board to capture, ransom, or kill. The asymmetric threat picture just shifted in a direction the IRGC was not fully prepared for. And, before moving forward, the story of the Corsair rescuing those Apache crew members deserves more than a passing mention, because it captures exactly what this platform represents. When an Apache helicopter was shot down over the Strait of Hormuz earlier in this conflict, it was a Corsair USV operating under the operational lead of U.S. Naval Force Central Command and the 82nd Airborne Division with Task Force 59 that was sent in to pull the 2 crew members out. The same autonomous platform that goes on attack missions was also the first responder in a rescue operation in hostile waters. That kind of mission flexibility, attack, surveillance, rescue, logistics, in a single autonomous platform is the definition of what military capability in the next generation is supposed to look like. And the fact that it happened in the Strait of Hormuz, the most contested maritime environment on Earth right now, means that every lesson learned from those missions is being captured and fed back into future development in real time. And the Corsair is not operating alone out there. CENTCOM has built an entire layered unmanned maritime architecture in the Strait. Underwater drones were deployed to help clear Iranian mines from the waterway beginning in April, because Iran had seeded the strait with roughly 8,000 naval mines over the course of this conflict, and clearing that minefield was a prerequisite for any serious restoration of commercial shipping. Those underwater systems went to work systematically, and by the time Cooper testified before Congress, more than 90% of those mines had been neutralized. MQ-9 Reaper drones are flying persistent ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, missions over the strait and along Iran's coastline around the clock, watching the coastal hideouts where the IRGC has concealed C-802 anti-ship cruise missiles, tracking fast attack boat movements, monitoring port activity at Bandar Abbas and Jask and Chabahar, and feeding targeting data into a network that connects all those manned and unmanned platforms into one unified operating picture. The Iranian IRGC Navy believes they are hidden. The network watching them disagrees. The blockade mechanics themselves deserve a complete breakdown because the public understanding of what enforcement actually looks like is incomplete and the details matter. When CENTCOM reinstated the blockade on July 14th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, they issued a statement that was clear and direct. American forces would enforce the blockade against all vessels transiting to or from Iranian ports and coastal areas, and the U.S. military would continue to support free traffic flow through regional waters for all vessels not violating that blockade. There are two separate things happening simultaneously in the same stretch of water. The U.S. military is blocking ships moving to and from Iranian ports, and the U.S. military is actively facilitating the transit of all other commercial vessels through the strait, both at the same time. That is the operational reality that the IRGC's narrative of Hormuz control cannot account for, because an entity that actually controlled the strait would not need the United States Navy to facilitate 900 commercial transits carrying 450 million barrels of crude oil while that control claim was being made. The enforcement sequence works in distinct escalating steps. Commercial vessels are monitored through the Aegis network and through maritime patrol aircraft and drone ISR. Vessels identified as heading to or from Iranian ports are hailed by U.S. naval forces via radio and instructed to alter course. The vast majority comply at the first contact. They receive the warning, they turn around, and they are redirected. That covers the largest category of incidents. Vessels that do not comply with the initial warning get a second and third contact, and at that point, U.S. naval assets move to intercept physically. For vessels that still refuse, CENTCOM is authorized to disable them by targeting non-lethal ship systems, primarily the engine room or propulsion system, to render them unable to continue their course without destroying the ship or harming the crew. And for vessels that want to confirm they are carrying legitimate non-sanctioned cargo, CENTCOM has been conducting verification boardings, which means U.S. Navy personnel go aboard, inspect the manifest and cargo, and clear the vessel to continue transit. By July 22nd, CENTCOM had redirected 9 commercial vessels, disabled 1, and conducted 2 verification boardings. Clean, documented professional enforcement with a clear escalation ladder that gives every captain a chance to comply before the consequences become physical. The verification boarding process, specifically, is worth explaining because it reveals something important about the legal and operational framework CENTCOM has built around the blockade. When a vessel is boarded for verification, U.S. Navy personnel are not simply searching it for banned cargo. They are building a documented evidence-based record of that vessel's compliance or non-compliance with the blockade that is legally defensible in international forums. CENTCOM knows that every action it takes in the strait is going to be scrutinized by Iran's diplomatic and legal apparatus, by international maritime organizations, and by the commercial shipping industry trying to assess risk. So the boarding procedure is conducted with documentation, with clear communication to the vessel's operators, and with a process that gives legitimate vessels a clear path to continue their journey. That professionalism is not just courtesy, it is the legal and reputational armor that allows the blockade to remain sustainable under international scrutiny, while Iran's violations of the same international maritime norms go undocumented and unacknowledged. The MT Levine is the case study for what happens at the top of that escalation ladder. The MT Levine was a Mozambique-flagged tanker operating under the alias MT Disha, and the alias alone tells you everything about the nature of the operation running this vessel. Legitimate commercial shipping does not operate under aliases. Iran's shadow fleet is built on the assumption that layered deception, foreign flag registration, name changes, transponder manipulation, shell company ownership structures spread across multiple jurisdictions creates enough complexity and ambiguity to avoid enforcement. The MT Levine had been under U.S. Treasury OFAC sanctions for 2 years. 2 years of documented evidence about what this vessel was doing, where it was going, and who it was serving before a single shot was fired at it. When the blockade gave U.S. forces the authority to enforce what the sanctions paperwork had already established, the MT Levine tried to run the blockade, multiple times, after multiple warnings. U.S. forces fired a precision round into its engine room. The engine room was hit. The crew quarters were untouched. All 28 seafarers aboard survived. Two separate pieces of video footage document the precise point of impact at the base of the smokestack directly above the engine room, making any claim that the crew quarters were targeted not just false, but visually debunked by the evidence the accusers themselves put online. CENTCOM's account was corroborated by the footage. The ship is no longer transiting to Iran. Iran's shadow fleet deserves attention as a concept because it reveals the depth and sophistication of the regime's parallel economy of deception and how systematically it has been operating for years. The IRGC does not own and operate Iranian oil tankers under the Iranian flag. That would make enforcement simple. Instead, the shadow fleet is a network of vessels registered under the flags of countries with minimal maritime regulatory oversight. Mozambique, Belize, Panama, Togo, Gabon, other states with looser flag state accountability, managed through layers of shell companies incorporated in jurisdictions across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific that create as much corporate distance as possible between IRGC revenue operations and the physical ships generating that revenue. The ships change their names regularly. They turn off their AIS transponders, the transponders that broadcast a vessel's identity and location, when they approach Iranian waters. They use ship-to-ship transfers at sea to move cargo without entering Iranian ports and showing up in port records. The whole architecture is designed to look like normal commercial activity from every angle except close, sustained expert surveillance. Organizations like Tanker Trackers and UANI have been building the pattern of life picture on these vessels for years, and OFAC has been adding them to the sanctions list. What the naval blockade has done is give teeth to years of sanctions paperwork that had previously been largely unenforceable at sea. And the Shadow Fleet's vulnerability is not just that it gets physically caught. Its vulnerability is that the deception architecture it depends on requires constant maintenance and is always one leak away from unraveling. When a vessel has been under OFAC sanctions for 2 years, the paper trail documenting what it has been doing is already built before any enforcement action is taken. When CENTCOM disables that vessel and posts the video evidence of the engagement alongside the documented sanction record, the entire chain of deception collapses into public view simultaneously. The ship captain, now the shell company, the flag state registry, the commodity trading front company that arranged the cargo, all of it becomes part of a public record that makes future Shadow Fleet operations incrementally harder to execute. Every vessel that gets caught makes the next vessel in the fleet marginally more expensive to operate and more likely to be identified. The enforcement is cumulative in a way that simple deterrence through the threat of force cannot fully replicate. Now, the fact-check dimension of this story is something CENTCOM has been executing with genuine effectiveness. And it is worth understanding how that works, because information warfare is as real as any other domain in this conflict. The IRGC's Iranian Joint Military Command posted on social media claiming that it controls exit and entry to the Strait of Hormuz, and that international mariners can only use routes the IRGC prefers. CENTCOM responded with a direct-sourced rebuttal. Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. The international waterway remains open for transit, regardless of IRGC threats and attacks. Commercial vessels continue to use the strait with U.S. military support, and more than 900 ships have transited since early May. Not a press release that the IRGC can dismiss. Documented numbers with a supporting record of every facilitated transit, every redirected vessel, every boarding. The IRGC's claim to control the strait is being contradicted in real time by the commercial traffic moving through it every single day under U.S. military escort. And CENTCOM is posting the receipts on X in real time. The information battlefield matters here because maritime insurance rates and commercial shipping decisions are being made based on perceived control of the strait. Every IRGC claim of control that goes unanswered raises insurance premiums and reduces transit volume. Every CENTCOM fact check that puts documented numbers alongside Iranian rhetoric helps keep commercial traffic moving and undermines the IRGC's ability to weaponize maritime uncertainty. The Aegis combat system is the nervous system of the entire U.S. naval operation in the strait, and understanding what it actually does explains why the American naval advantage in this fight is so overwhelming. The Aegis system, fielded on the guided missile destroyers and cruisers operating in the region, including ships like the USS Mason, is a fully integrated radar, fire control, and combat management system that tracks targets across the air, surface, and subsurface domains simultaneously. What makes it decisive in this operational environment is not just what it can track, but how it shares what it tracks. Every Aegis-equipped ship in the theater is connected to every other Aegis-equipped ship in a network that shares its complete tactical picture in real time. Fighter jets operating from carriers are linked into that picture. MQ-9 drones feeding ISR data are integrated into that picture. The result is a comprehensive, real-time, multi-domain operational picture that the entire U.S. naval force in the region is working from simultaneously. There is no information gap between one ship and another. There is no targeting seam that an Iranian fast attack boat can slip through. The network sees everything, shares everything, and presents every participant in the U.S. naval operation with the same complete picture of what is happening across the entire theater. The IRGC has radars and communications and fast attack boats. They do not have anything close to that integrated, networked, real-time situational awareness, and that gap is as decisive as the difference in physical firepower. The MH-60R Seahawk helicopter deserves a mention because it is the workhorse of naval operations in conditions like this, and most people do not know enough about what it actually does. The Romeo, as it is called by the crews flying it, is the Navy's primary shipborne multi-mission helicopter, and it does things that are unglamorous but operationally critical. It delivers supplies between ships at sea, keeping guided missile destroyers operating without having to pull back to port. It conducts surface surveillance, feeding imagery of vessels in the operational area back to the Aegis network for identification and tracking. It carries active dipping sonar and sonobuoys for submarine detection, an important capability in an environment where Iran's submarine force, however limited, adds a subsurface dimension to the threat picture. And it carries weapon systems including torpedoes and Hellfire missiles for direct engagement when called upon. The Seahawk crews operating out of the guided missile destroyers in the Arabian Sea right now are executing missions every day that keep the entire surface force effective, and they do it in the kind of heat and operational tempo that makes every flight a serious professional undertaking. Hats off to those crews. Now, here's the honest assessment, because the full picture requires it. What the U.S. military has built in the Strait of Hormuz is genuinely unprecedented, and it has significantly degraded the IRGC's ability to threaten commercial shipping. But degraded is not eliminated, and anyone representing the situation as fully resolved is not giving you the accurate picture. The IRGC demonstrated throughout Operation Epic Fury's 13-night air campaign that it retains the ability to generate multi-front missile and drone attacks on regional targets. Iran still has fast attack craft operating along the coastline, and the narrow geography of the strait gives those small, fast boats a persistent ability to threaten commercial traffic in ways that require constant vigilance to counter. The CE-802 anti-ship cruise missiles that the IRGC has been hiding in coastal terrain, popping up from concealed launch positions that look like rock outcroppings from aerial surveillance, some of those remain. The IRGC's underwater mine-laying capability, while heavily degraded by the mine-clearing operations, is not completely neutralized. Iran's ability to use proxy forces, Houthi maritime harassment in the Bab al-Mandab, and economic disruption through oil price manipulation add dimensions of pressure that go beyond the physical strait itself. The honest military picture is that the U.S. has fundamentally shifted the balance of power in the Strait of Hormuz in a way the IRGC cannot quickly reverse, while simultaneously acknowledging that the IRGC retains enough residual capability to make the operating environment genuinely challenging for the near term. The shift is enormous. The job is not finished. And here's the financial dimension that tells you just how much pressure the blockade is actually creating on the Iranian side. The blockade is costing Iran an estimated $500 million per day in lost oil revenue. Not $500 million total per day. Iran's oil exports have been effectively frozen for vessels trying to reach Iranian ports under normal commercial arrangements. The oil that does move does so through the Shadow Fleet's most clandestine operations, at significant risk, and at the heavily discounted prices that those circumstances force. Iran was already selling to China at a steep discount before the blockade. Now the discount is even steeper because the logistical risk premium eats further into the price. Meanwhile, war risk insurance for commercial vessels in the region has spiked to between 7.5% and 10% of hull value per voyage, which adds an enormous cost premium to any cargo transit associated with the conflict zone. Brent crude oil prices have been hovering in the $96 to $98 range as the market tries to price in the strait disruption, and any escalation toward either Bab el-Mandab or a full strait closure would push those numbers dramatically higher. Iran understands that the economic bleeding from the blockade is existential. At $500 million a day, every day the blockade holds is a day that the regime's ability to fund its military, pay its proxy forces, maintain internal security, and keep the civilian population from boiling over is being directly undermined. The IRGC is not just losing weapons in this conflict. It is losing the financial oxygen the entire regime breathes. That economic pressure is also directly connected to the 20% fee that President Trump announced the United States would charge for use of the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC has been running a de facto extortion operation on the world's most important energy waterway for years, demanding payments, imposing arbitrary conditions on transit, seizing vessels, and generating hundreds of millions of dollars a month in revenue while calling it protection. Trump's announcement that the United States would be the entity collecting a transit fee flipped the entire premise of that arrangement on its head. It was not just a financial measure, it was a message. The entity that actually provides safety in the Strait of Hormuz collects the toll for that service. The entity that has been blowing up ships in the Strait while claiming to provide protection is not a legitimate toll collector. It is a protection racket, and the protection racket's operator is being replaced. The psychological impact of that framing on the IRGC commanders who have built their personal power and wealth around exactly that racket should not be underestimated. The US is not just defeating the IRGC militarily, it is redefining who holds legitimate authority over the Strait in a way that makes the IRGC's entire position look like what it has always been: organized crime at state scale. Now let us talk about where the air campaign and the naval campaign connect, because understanding them as separate parallel operations misses the key synergy between them. The 13 nights of Operation Epic Fury strikes were not conducted independently of the blockade. They were specifically designed to dismantle the military infrastructure that gives the IRGC the ability to threaten ships in the Strait in the first place: coastal radar systems, surveillance nodes, anti-ship missile launch sites, drone storage and launch facilities, fast attack boat bases. Every target on the Epic Fury list was a target selected because it contributed to the IRGC's maritime harassment capability. The air campaign created the conditions that made the blockade enforceable. You cannot run an effective naval blockade in a waterway where the adversary has a functioning integrated coastal defense network with active surface-to-air missile coverage, functioning radar picture, and working anti-ship missile capability along the entire coastline. Epic Fury stripped those capabilities away night by night, and the blockade enforcement became progressively more viable as the coastal defense picture degraded. The F-35s and F-16CJ Wild Weasels, suppressing Iranian radar and air defenses, made the airspace safe for the maritime patrol aircraft and helicopters supporting the blockade. The GBU-72s dropping on missile storage facilities removed the weapons that would have been the biggest threat to the guided missile destroyers enforcing the blockade at close range. The Corsair USV strike at Bandar Abbas removed naval maintenance capability that would have kept the IRGC's fast attack boats operational. Every element connects to every other element, and the combined effect is a level of maritime control over the Strait of Hormuz that no adversary has been able to contest in the period since the campaign began. The strategic picture that is emerging from all of this extends well beyond the immediate Iran conflict, and it is worth taking the time to understand what is actually being established in the Strait right now, because the implications are enormous. What the United States is building in the Strait of Hormuz is not just a temporary blockade. It is a demonstration model for how American military power can dominate a contested maritime choke point, using a combination of manned naval vessels, autonomous surface and undersea systems, networked air power, and persistent ISR that creates a complete, real-time operational picture across all domains simultaneously. Task Force 59 did not exist in its current form before this conflict. The Corsair USV had not been used in combat before this conflict. The doctrine for integrating autonomous sea drones into naval blockade enforcement did not exist in published form before this conflict. All of that is being written right now in the Strait of Hormuz, with real operations, real results, and real lessons being captured by the most sophisticated military organization in the world. China is watching every element of this. Russia is watching every element of this. Any adversary that might one day contest American naval power in a choke point, and there are several with strong interest in that question, is watching and learning. What they are seeing is that the U.S. military's advantage in autonomous systems, networked operations, and precision munitions has reached a level of integration that makes contested choke point control by a regional power essentially untenable against a fully committed American military response. Here's the 40 chess strategic analysis. Iran came into this phase of the conflict believing that the Strait of Hormuz was its ultimate trump card, that the ability to threaten 20% of global seaborne oil trade gave the regime permanent, unchallengeable leverage over the international community and over the United States specifically. That calculation has been the foundation of Iranian strategic thinking for decades. It is the reason the IRGC invested so heavily in anti-ship missiles, fast attack boats, coastal surveillance, naval mine warfare, and all the infrastructure of maritime harassment. The Strait was supposed to be the thing no one could take from them without catastrophic consequences for the global economy. And the answer the United States gave to that calculation is currently conducting its 200-and-somethingth day of operations in the very waterway Iran thought was untouchable. The blockade costs Iran $500 million a day. More than 900 ships have transited under U.S. protection. 90% of Iran's naval mine inventory has been cleared. Bandar Abbas naval base has been struck by autonomous sea drones. The coastal missile network has been systematically degraded by 13 consecutive nights of airstrikes. And CENTCOM is on X, posting receipts, fact-checking every IRGC claim with documented numbers, and making the real-time case to the international shipping community that the Strait is open for business for everyone except vessels serving the Iranian regime. The IRGC's trump card has become the board on which the United States is demonstrating military capability It could not have demonstrated any other way, against a target set that is real and consequential rather than theoretical, in operational conditions that will generate doctrine and capability improvements that will outlast this conflict by decades. The Strait of Hormuz right now is a proving ground and a turning point simultaneously. Iran thought it was their most powerful weapon. It turns out it was the place where the American military's next generation of maritime dominance capability was going to be field tested and validated. That is the strategic irony at the heart of this entire situation, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. The IRGC's greatest strategic asset became the stage on which the American military validated its next generation of combat capability in conditions that no simulation or exercise could have replicated. Every autonomous drone mission, every blocked Shadow Fleet tanker, every Aegis-tracked ballistic missile intercept, every Blockade verification boarding, all of it producing doctrine, lessons learned, and validated capability that will outlast this conflict by a generation. The immediate question is what Iran does in the informal quiet-for-quiet pause that both sides are currently observing. U.S.-Iran diplomatic talks are reportedly continuing. The blockade remains in full effect. The air campaign infrastructure is still in place and ready to restart. 50,000 American service members remain in the theater. And somewhere in all of this, the free people of Iran are watching their regime spend every dollar it has fighting for the right to continue extorting the world, while the consequences of that choice rain down on the country's military infrastructure and economy with increasing precision and decreasing mercy. The answer to that situation is not a better anti-ship missile. It is not a more sophisticated Shadow Fleet. It is a regime that finally looks at the board as it actually exists, rather than as it hoped the board would look, and makes a decision accordingly. So what do you think? Is what the United States is doing in the Strait of Hormuz right now going to be enough to force that decision? Does the combination of blockade enforcement, autonomous sea drones, financial hemorrhage, and degraded coastal defense create enough cumulative pressure to change the IRGC's calculation? Or does Iran find a way to reconstitute, adapt, and outlast American patience? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because every perspective in this conversation adds something, and I genuinely read everyone. If this breakdown gave you the full picture that individual headlines are not providing, share it with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening out there. Hit subscribe if you have not already, so you do not miss a single update as this situation develops. It is moving fast, it is consequential, and we are going to stay right on top of every piece of it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We will see you in the next one.